Okay, family, there we are. FBI warning: federal law allows citizens to reproduce, distribute, or exhibit portions of copyrighted motion pictures, videotapes, or video discs under certain circumstances without the authorization of the copyright holder. This is called fair use and is allowed for the purposes of criticism, news reporting, teaching, and parody, which doesn't infringe on the copyright under 17 USC 107. And my friends, we ought to keep our heads down and our hands up. Men are always to pray, speaking to themselves in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. Always, always, always. We also need to keep our head inside these scriptures, because this is just like reading tomorrow's newspaper today. This is the way that we make sure that we are walking out this Torah and keeping ourselves together in the word of the Most High, keeping those laws, statutes, and commandments which we are commanded to keep throughout all of our generations. And no matter who tells you that we should not be doing that, I tell you what, you need to read your Bible more and you read your scriptures more, and tell that pastor, whomever told you that they are a liar. Now, how are you, family? How you doing? Listen, we're coming in here again today to read some more of the occurrences that happened between Vespasian and Titus at the taking of Jerusalem in 70 AD. A lot of the people who escaped out of that escaped out and ended up down into went south into Africa and started to make sure that they were being protected and taken care of, by escaping out. They were taking care of their lives. And we can find a lot of this on maps throughout the world, and all we have to do is just look for them because they are there. Let's see, if you were born in the 60s or the 70s, then on your birth certificate they'll probably have you listed as a Negro. And if you don't believe that you're a Negro, then you have a problem, because I'll tell you, in 1747, when this map was made, they knew who you were. And not only did they know who you were, they tried to tell the world who you were, and they did so quite honestly by utilizing this map right here. And utilizing this map, they were able to tell the world just who you were. And it says so right there. Proper Guinea, Kingdom of Judah. Who was Judah? Judah was one of the 12 tribes of Israel. It says or Waida. That's how the French and the Spanish would say who you were. For the name of the tribe that was there at the time, whom they placed there on the slave coast to be slaves and shipped out around the entire world. Now, who on the planet has been slaves that have been shipped all around the world? To this day, this description only fits one group of people throughout the world, and they are known right here, placed there by the king of Spain and the Spain and Portugal, called the Kingdom of Judah. And this is a 1747 map. We didn't make this map. We didn't make a map and tell the world where to come and get us, and nor did we make a map and call it Negro land and show them where to come and get us. So, by saying that, wanting you to understand just who you are and what's going on with you. And so you need to know, because someone has lied to you. They haven't told you the truth about who you are. You are the true house of Israel. You are one of the tribes of Israel. If there is someone in your family who is a descendant of a slave, then you are of the house of Israel. I don't care what your pastor told you preaching across that pulpit. It does not matter. We did not create that map. No, none of us created. We don't have cartographers that make maps. In the 1400s and the 14th century, they wrote books about how they kicked the Spanish Jews, meaning us, out of Spain and Portugal. My father has that in his DNA. I did the DNA I did my own DNA, and I found that in my father's lineage. Okay, so to my brothers and sisters, and I'm talking about my blood brothers and sisters, my baby sister, my older sister, any of you, who called me crazy, said I was a liar, whatever, call me racist or whatever. I want to know, why is it that when we discover our own heritage and we start talking about who we are as a people, all of a sudden, the first thing rolls off somebody's lips is racist. How can you be racist against yourself? When the Japanese decided to find out who they were, nobody called them racist. You got other people running around here, Irish and whoever else, decided to find out who they are. Nobody calls them racist. But the moment that we figure out who we are, then all of a sudden we got to be racist. And the cold part about it is that when people of your own come against you, okay, we are so conditioned to tear each other down and beat each other down and start bumping our gums before we start doing the research. And so that's one of the things that we're going to talk about today. And that's where we're going. We're going back into the pages that talk about what was happening in Jerusalem at the time of 70 A.D. when Titus and Vespasian sacked the city of Jerusalem and ran all of those melanated people out of there. Okay, because during that time in 70 A.D. there was no Euro-Gentile, pale-skinned pinky running around in that area. The only time they got into that area is when the Romans came. Okay, once the Romans got there, then that area was colonized. But prior to that, no Romans. No pale-skinned Euro-Gentile pinkies running around, blonde hair, blue-eyed, nothing. None of that prior to this. So that means that the person that you call Jesus was not blonde-haired, blue-eyed running around in that area either. Okay? So we're going to look at this, and we're going to go through it because I want you to see who was being dealt with at this time. Because at this time in this area, it was not anything other than brown-skinned, melanated Hebrews fighting against some Roman invaders, and it was because they were in disobedience to the Most High that He told them that they were going to lose the temple. Okay, and 40 years later, that's exactly what happened. When you look at Matthew 24, Luke 21, Mark 13, you'll see that Yeshua HaMashiach had come out of the temple, and the disciples came to Him and said, Look how beautiful this temple is. And He said, I want to tell you that not one stone is going to be left standing upon another. 40 years later, here comes Titus and Vespasian. Look it up. But you don't have to because I got it right here. So anyway, we're going to go back into this chapter 2. This is where we left off. We're going to get it going today. And actually, I started on this earlier, and then Rabbi called me, and we had a long conversation. And then I had to start over again. And there were some things that happened in the middle, and I decided that I was not going to bring all of that madness into this study. And we're just going to keep the study the way that it is. So this is chapter 2. This is Flavius Josephus' Wars of the Jews, book number 4, The Surrender of Gischala, when John flies away from it to Jerusalem, number 1. Now, no place of Galilee remained to be taken but the small city of Gischala, whose multitude yet were desirous of peace, for they were generally husbandmen and always applied themselves to cultivate the fruits of the earth. However, there were a great number that belonged to a band of robbers that were already corrupted and had crept in among them, and some of the governing part of the citizens were sick of the same distemper. It was John, the son of a certain man whose name was Levi, that drew them into this rebellion and encouraged them in it. He was a cunning knave, and of a temper that could put on various shapes, very rash in expecting great things, and very sagacious in bringing about what he hoped for. It was known to everybody that he was fond of war, in order to thrust himself into authority, and the seditious part of the people of Gischala were under his management, by whose means the populace, who seemed ready to send ambassadors in order to a surrender, waited for the coming of the Romans in battle array. Vespasian sent against them Titus, with 1,000 horsemen, but withdrew the 10th legion to Scythopolis, while he returned to Caesarea with the 2 other legions, that he might allow them to refresh themselves after their long and hard campaign, thinking withal that the plenty which was in those cities would improve their bodies and their spirits against the difficulties they were to go through afterwards. For he saw there would be occasion for great pains about Jerusalem, which was not yet taken, because it was the royal city and the principal city of the whole nation, and because those that had run away from the war in other places got all together thither. It was also naturally strong, and the walls that were built round it made him not a little concerned about it. Moreover, he esteemed the men that were in it to be so courageous and bold that even without the consideration of the walls, it would be hard to subdue them. for which reason he took care and exercised his soldiers beforehand for the work, as they do wrestlers before they begin their undertaking. Number 2. Now Titus, as he rode up to Gischala, found it would be easy for him to take the city upon the first onset, but knew withal that if he took it by force, the multitude would be destroyed by the soldiers without mercy. Now he was already satiated with the shedding of blood, and pitied the major part, who would then perish without distinction together with the guilty. So he was rather desirous the city might be surrendered up to him on terms. Accordingly, when he saw the wall full of those men that were of the corrupted party, he said to them that he could not but wonder what it was they depended upon when they alone stayed to fight the Romans after every other city had been taken by them, especially when they have seen cities much better fortified than theirs is, overthrown by a single attack upon them. While as many as have entrusted themselves to the security of the Romans' right hands, which he now offers to them without regarding their former insolence, do enjoy their own possessions in safety, for that while they had hopes of recovering their liberty, they might be pardoned, but that their that their continuance still in their opposition, when they saw that it be impossible, was inexcusable, for that if they will not comply with such humane offers, the right hands for security, that they should have experience of such a war as would spare nobody, should soon be made sensible that their wall would be but a trifle when battered by the Roman machines, and depending on which they demonstrate themselves to be the only Galileans that were no better than arrogant slaves and captives. Now 3. Now, none of the populace durst not only make a reply, but durst not so much as get up on the wall, for it was all taken up by the robbers, who were also the guards at the gates, in order to prevent any of the rest from going out, in order to propose terms of submission, and from receiving any of the horsemen into the city. But John returned Titus this answer, that for himself he was content to hearken to his proposals, and that he would either persuade or force those that refused them. Yet he said that Titus ought to have such regard to the Jewish law as to grant them leave to celebrate that day, which was the 7th day of the week, on which it was unlawful not only to remove their arms, but even to treat of peace also, and that even the Romans were not ignorant how the period of the 7th day was among them a cessation from all labors, and that he should compel them to transgress the law about that day would be equally guilty with those that were compelled to transgress it, and that this delay could be of no disadvantage to him, for why should anybody think of doing anything in the night unless it was to fly away, which he might prevent by placing his camp round about them, and that they should think it a great point gained if they might not be obliged to transgress the laws of their country, and that it would be a right thing for him who designed to grant them peace, without their expectation of such a favor, to preserve the laws of those they saved inviolable. Thus did this man put a trick upon Titus, not so much out of the regard for the 7th day as it was for his own as to his own preservation, for he was afraid lest he should be quite deserted if the city should be taken, and his hopes of life in that night in his flight therein. So he was afraid that if he was afraid that if the city got taken, all the people that he had convinced to fight with him would turn him in. So he was afraid of that. Now this was the work of Elohim, that's what you call God, who therefore preserved this John, that he might bring the destruction of Jerusalem. So John had to live and make it to Jerusalem so that Jerusalem can be brought down. This is the prophecy unfolding. As also it was his work that Titus was prevailed with this pretense for a delay, and that he pitched his camp further off the city at Sidessa. This Sidessa was a strong Mediterranean village of the Tyrians, which always hated and made war against the Jews. It had also a great number of inhabitants, and was well fortified, which made it a proper place for such as were enemies of the Jewish nation. Now 4. Now in the night time, when John saw that there was no Roman guard about the city, he seized the opportunity directly, and taking with him not only the armed men that were about him, but a considerable number of those that had little to do, together with their families, he fled to Jerusalem. And indeed, though the man was making haste to get away, he was was tormented with fears of being a captive or losing his life. Yet did he prevail with himself to take out of the city along with him a multitude of women and children as far as 20 furlongs. But there he left them as he proceeded further upon his journey, where those that were left behind made sad lamentations. For the farther every one of them was come from his own people, the nearer they thought themselves to be to their enemies. They also affrighted themselves with this thought, that those who would carry them into captivity were just at hand, and still turned themselves back at the mere noise they made themselves in this hasty flight, as if those for whom they fled were just upon them. Many also of them missed their ways, and the earnestness of such as aimed to outgo the rest threw down many of them, and indeed there was a miserable destruction made of the women and children. While some of them took the courage to call their husband and kinsmen back, and to beseech them with the bitterest lamentations to stay for them. But John's exhortation, who cried out to them to save themselves and fly away, prevailed. He said also that if the Romans should seize upon those whom they left behind, they would be revenged on them for it. So this multitude that ran thus away was dispersed abroad, according to each of them as was able to run, one faster or slower than the other. Their own fear caused them to trample one another, and their own fear, Vespasian and Titus were in a whole nother city. Titus was in a whole nother city. He was nowhere nearby. But out there in the middle of the dark, they were scaring themselves. That sounds like some Hebrews, doesn't it? Now, on the next day, Titus came to the wall to make the agreement, whereupon the people opened the gates to him and came out to him with their children and wives, and made acclamations of joy to him as to one that had been their benefactor, and had delivered the city out of the custody. They also informed him of John's flight, and besought him to spare them, and to come in and bring the rest of those that were for innovations to punishment. Those that were for innovations were the ones who were stirring up trouble in the city. So they invited him in so that he could come in and set the city aright and grab those guys who were stirring up trouble and punish them. But Titus, not so much regarding the supplications of the people, sent part of his horsemen to pursue after John, but they could not overtake him, for he was gotten to Jerusalem before or already. They also slew 6,000 of the women and children who went out with him, but returned back and brought with them almost 3,000. However, Titus was greatly displeased that he had not been able to bring this John, who had deluded him, to punishment. Yet he had captives now, as well as the corrupted part of the city, to satisfy his anger, when it missed of John. So he entered the city in the midst of the acclamations of joy, and when he had given orders to the soldiers to pull down a small part of the wall, as of a city taken in war, he repressed those that had disturbed the city rather by threatenings than by executions. So what they're saying is that he took those people, the ones who were the robber band, he put them in check by threatening them rather than killing them. He would let them stew in their own guilt. For he thought that many would accuse innocent persons out of their own private animosities and quarrels, as if he should attempt to distinguish those that were worthy of punishment from the rest, and that it was better to let a guilty person alone under his fears than to destroy with him anyone that did not deserve it, for that probably such a one might be taught prudence by the fear of the punishment he had deserved, and have a shame upon him for his former offenses when he had been forgiven, but that the punishment of such as have been once put to death could never be retrieved. So let him live in his shame, because nobody's gonna give him bread, nobody's gonna give him shelter, nobody's gonna trade with him. He's gonna be an outcast in the community, because everybody knows what he did when he came to the city working with John. However, he placed a garrison in the city for the city's security, by which means he should restrain those that were for innovations, that's the robbers and criminals, and should leave those that were peaceably disposed in greater security, so they can't stand up again and take control of the city. And thus all Galilee was taken, but this is not till after it had cost the Romans much pain before it could be taken by them. So the Romans had lost quite a bit of ground and had lost quite a bit of people, taking the other cities. So it's a little dark over here, isn't it? So had lost quite a bit of people taking the other cities when they had climbed up the tower, and then the city collapsed on them, and he lost a lot of people. So they are going to go into a battle here in number 4. We're going to get to number 3. We're going to go to number 3, and this is concerning John of Gischala, concerning the Zealots and the high priest Annas, and also how the Jews raised seditions one against another in Jerusalem. We're going to see, because this is just like who we are today. This is what we do. This is what we do. We end up turning on one another. Left and right, we turn on one another. Before we'll support each other, we'll turn on each other. And we'll fight like the Dickens against anybody who gets in between us, and then we'll turn around and go back to fighting each other. And that's something that's happened in Jerusalem, and that's something that we're going to see as we start to move through this. But the Most High intervened. He let the city be taken, and he let some things be seen by the Romans, and they knew that it was a divine order that they could take Jerusalem. So that's the thing that we're looking at when we look at this. This is Flavius Josephus. This is Wars of the Jews, Book 4. We're going to be reading Chapter 3 when we come back. And my family, I tell you what, I want to thank you for hanging out. This is probably the shortest one that we've done, and we'll do them, and we'll continue to do them. But I want to say thank you, and let's just keep this stuff happening as much as we possibly can, right? There's no reason why we can't learn about our history, what they've kept from us for so long. We need to know who we are and what our history is. All right, I'll see you next time.